Well, good day to you. It is February the 14th, and that means it's Valentine's Day for you and me, kiddies. But wherever you are, whenever you're listening to this video, I want to welcome you and I want to thank you for coming, and hopefully, maybe even inspire you to check out some of the links that I provided in the description portion of these videos. Because if you're new, I hope that you take the time to investigate this information for yourself by checking out those links, because those links take you to websites that give you wonderful background information about what we talk about. If you know all about it, you can always know more. Check out those links too and educate yourself better about it. But you can also learn more about what we talk about here by joining the discussion. Post comments. I'll try to address the comments in the next video if it pertains to what we talk about, and we can learn more about it. If you want to ask a question, post your question in the comments section. Email me at searchforsigns@mail.com. That's the other way to get a question to me. I've even had people join the discussion by sending me links to articles that talk about this information, and then I post it up on Facebook. And I've even had some people repost some of my posts on Facebook, and I want to thank you guys for doing that too. Now, in the last video, I forgot to thank Corey C. and John. Corey C. for your question, which I'll get into in just a second, and John for your comment. I thank you very much for doing that. But in this video, Brian Gerard, Thomas Otto, and Ricardo Pels-Wesley, you guys all commented. I really do thank you for doing that. Now, Corey C., what was your question? Is your email correct on your About? And I replied directly to you. I don't know if you saw it or not, but yes, it is correct. Searchforsigns@mail.com. There's also a link to my email in the description portion of these videos. So if you want to email me, you can email me that way, Corey. If you did email me, I did not get it. So I don't know if you took the time to email me or just wanted to know what my email is. But thank you very much for the question, nonetheless. Now, I had two comments, one from Thomas Otto and one from Brian Gerard. I want to talk about Thomas Otto's first, and then kind of branch into Brian Gerard's, if that's okay with you guys. You guys commented about the last video that I put up where I talked about the future collapse of the economies of the world based on a prediction that Maitreya made a long time ago, actually. Now, I also read an article from Benjamin Creme's master talking about the new freedom. And he was talking about a new freedom that will come over humanity when the economies finally do collapse, because we're living under an economic authoritarian structure, or totalitarianistic structure, if you want to put it that way. So the three big authoritarian structures, political, economic, and to a lesser degree religious, have their hold on humanity, keeping humanity from really truly experiencing what true freedom is. If you read into Maitreya's priorities, there's a article that Benjamin Creme's master wrote called The Son of Man, talking about who and what Maitreya is. At the end of it, he talks about his priorities: the establishment of peace, the inauguration of a system of sharing, the removal of guilt and fear, the cleansing of the hearts and minds of men, the education of mankind in the laws of life and love, and an introduction to the mysteries, the beautification of our cities, the removal of barriers of travel and interchange of peoples, and a creation of pool of knowledge accessible to all. If you look at the priorities of Maitreya, they really are two things: true justice and true freedom, which, according to the masters, every one of those masters will tell you that you cannot have true justice without true freedom, and you cannot have true freedom without true justice. And we are not living in a world that has true justice, and we are certainly not living in a world that has true freedom. Now, there's a saying out there: an injustice to one is an injustice to all, right? Well, if it's one and the same, then you could say the same thing about freedom. A lack of freedom to one is a lack of freedom to all, right? Now, in the United States, we have this ideal that we promote, like a torch that we'd like to shine on other people in other countries and so forth. We have freedom because the Founding Fathers wrote it into the Constitution that we should have freedom, right? Well, is there true freedom here in the United States? Well, I guess if you had enough money to give you that freedom, then yeah, you could say you were free. But if you don't have any money, you're working on, let's say, minimum wage or whatever, and you're working 2 or 3 jobs just to make ends meet, and it's getting harder and harder to make ends meet, well, you don't have true freedom, do you? So you can't say that there's true freedom in the United States, because economically, there is no freedom. politically there's no freedom even. Now, the problem is with, the authoritarian, totalitarianistic economic regime, right, is it kind of spreads out into everything. Healthcare, education, of course, politics, right, even religion. But you can't get away from it. That's my biggest frustration with it. There's nowhere you can go anywhere in the world, really, unless you just want to live in a cave somewhere and live off of grubs, that you can't get away from it. It's everywhere. If you wanted to live under a religious authoritarian regime or structure, then yes, you could go to church or any one of the churches and experience what it's like to be oppressed religiously, right? But if you don't want to, then you don't have to go to those churches, and you can live just fine without that, right? You can experience from time to time when you interact with some of those people, but for the most part, you can kind of live your life without having to experience that type of oppression by not going to church. But how do you do that economically, right? So in the article that I read from Benjamin Creme's master, he talked about how the collapses of the economies of the world will lead to a new freedom in humanity. But again, freedom and justice are one and the same. So once the economies collapse, Maitreya is already giving interviews on TV, he's already speaking to the world through the media and those kind of things. Well, the thing that he's going to advocate first is that humanity accept the principle of sharing. Take the resources that are just sitting there wasting away and giving it to the people, not only in the country that has the excesses, but to other countries that need it and so forth. It'll eventually bring about trust, will eventually bring about justice, will give us peace, give us freedom, and then give us a future of what Benjamin Creme's master said is a promise of revealed divinity, because true freedom is revealed divinity. It's living life as a divine soul. That is true freedom. You can't do it when your needs aren't being taken care of. You can't do it when you're living every day just to make ends meet. You can't truly be a creative being in that way. So that's just a little synopsis of the last video I put up. Now, Thomas Otto, what did you have to say? They said, hi, Gary, the problem isn't the evil market forces. It's capitalism itself, in my humble opinion, the system that creates extreme wealth for the few and exploits the many. The stock market needs crashes from time to time. These are market cycles, no danger to the system, even stabilizes it. As I said the other day, we need new political and economic structures for the new age. Well, I appreciate your comment. I really, really do. And this isn't the preferred way that I like to do it, because I know, you're commenting on what I said in the video. And like I said, I appreciate your comment, and then I'm going to give you my, I'm going to retort to what you said, basically. I'm going to comment on what you said, right? And it's going to sound like I'm trying to get the last word, which I'm not. But I do think, Thomas, in my humble opinion, you're splitting hairs. We're talking about the same thing. I just think you're using different verbiage, right? Now, Maitreya would tell you, because he has said this before, that the markets in and of themselves have their place. It just depends on how much dominance they have over people's lives, right? You look over the past 25, 30 years, right? We've gone from the markets not having really anything to do about anything to anytime there's a world event, how are the markets going to respond is the big question that people have, right? It's front page news, right? And you've even seen time to time where there have been world events that would have caused the market to just tumble, and it's done the exact opposite, right? So the other thing that Maitreya would say is that market forces are blind. They have no account for what's real and what isn't real. And then the other danger is that our world leaders are blind, and they're following the blind market forces, as Maitreya put it. And by the blind leaders following blind market forces, they're leading their people right off a cliff, is what he says. So capitalism in and of itself is just an ideology, just like communism, just like socialism, just like republicanism, just like, Christianity, you can go on and on and on, right? It's just an ideal, it's just an ideology. In and of itself, not truly evil, it's just a belief structure. Where it comes into play is what it does to humanity in the process, right? So commercialization as Maitreya puts it, is more dangerous than a nuclear bomb. But he did say that capitalism in and of itself will be into the future. It just depends on what percentage, right? So right now in the United States, it's about 95% capitalism, 5% socialism, where the real percentage should be that really meets the needs of the people, but yet allows for some upstart would be, I think, 80-20. 80% socialism, 20% capitalism, I think is what Maitreya would say, I think, from what I remember. But commercialization, that's the evil. And so he uses commercialization and market forces almost interchangeably, but I think you're talking about it. You're saying capitalism, he's saying market forces. So what's the difference? You're talking about the same thing. You know what I mean? So hopefully you see where I'm coming from with that. But the other thing that Benjamin Creme's master said about commercialization, how did he put it? He said it's like a monster who has its grip on the throat of humanity. Squeezing out, how did he say it? Any creative thought or generous notion, I think is what he said. And if you look at it, it's true. Let's just look at the creativity, what it's doing to creativity and innovation, right? One of the things that people like to tout when it comes to how much they love about capitalism or even commercialization or market forces or the free market or whatever you want to call it, right? Just words, but we're all talking about the same thing, right, Thomas? Does it truly bring about innovation? To a degree it does, right? Which is why Maitreya would say that we should still have about 20% capitalism when all is said and done, but yet the needs of the people are met, right? Because we need to have some innovation in that way. But if you look at it the way it is today with commercialization, right? Here's a phrase for you, planned obsolescence, right? Right now, companies like GE and Whirlpool that make appliances are making those appliances less effective and with less longevity because it means more money for them. If you have to stop what you're doing, go buy another refrigerator or a washing machine or dishwasher or whatever, because the one that they built was planned to go out, right? And where they already apparently have the technology to be able to have a refrigerator that could last 30 years. So you could be a new couple, getting started with your life, don't have any kids, buy a refrigerator, and by the time your kids are getting married, you have to get a new refrigerator. But now you have to get like 3 or 4 by that time, right? So of course they're going to make more money that way. Same thing with, pharmaceutical companies, right? Where's the money in curing the disease or treating the disease? Well, they found that treating the disease is far more lucrative than just coming up with a cure for that disease, right? And then you look at other things that companies do, like, are they allowing for innovation to come and take over the free market, in that way, where they, where the better, more efficient product wins? No. If a new innovation comes along, right, and you know this, Thomas, right, because we're all pretty much aware of this, and it could mean the extinction of a company that's already established, they will do whatever they can to destroy that innovation, whether it's buy the patent from the inventor and shelf it to keep it from ever hitting the markets because they know it would mean the end of their business or their business model or whatever, to doing God knows what to the person or whatever. And even looking at it a step further, what companies do today, where they market and have this propaganda even to the people to keep people believing that the way the system is better for them, even when it isn't, even when they know it's not best for them to keep it in the place as it is. They have done such a wonderful job because they have the money to keep throwing it into people's, keep brainwashing people over and over and over again that this is the way it's supposed to be, this is the way it's supposed to be. They do it with healthcare all the time, right? It's better for you to spend $100 on insulin treatments than to cap it at $37 or whatever the Democrats want to do. It's better to do. It's better for you. Even if you're the one I don't use insulin, so it doesn't matter to me, but I might in the future, I guess. But, there are people who struggle month in and month out because they have to have these insulin treatments. and yet they'll fight tooth and nail for the system that's screwing them over every day. It's crazy. It's absolutely nuts, right? So commercialization is doing just that. And any corporation that would, let's say, lessen the cost of something for a generous notion, as Benjamin Crime's master put it, well, commercialization just squeezes that right out of them. And you don't do that. Why would we do that? We can make more money that way. We would make less money that way. We need to make more money by screwing over the people, right? So you were talking about the same thing, but that's the evil in it. And so ultimately, when the economies collapse, according to Benjamin Crime's master, it will bring about a new light and a new freedom of humanity. But what will happen when that system does finally collapse is humanity will look to Maitreya, who's already speaking to the people through the media, right? And he'll start to then say a little bit more forcefully, I guess, or not forcefully, a little bit more directly, we need to accept the principle of sharing. This is the only way we're going to do this. As Maitreya would say, without sharing, there will be no justice. Without justice, there will be no peace. And without peace, there will be no future. Well, peace and freedom are one and the same, as far as I'm concerned. So you can't have peace, you can't have freedom without justice. And the only way to bring about justice is to bring about the principle of sharing, is what Maitreya would say. That's reverse engineering it back. Now, I do appreciate your comment, though, and I thank you so much for that. And hopefully we've learned a little bit more about the impending economic crash from the view of the masters and what it means for humanity versus what an investment coach would tell you, right, on YouTube or something like that. Now, Brian Gerard, your comment was rather long, and there's some things I do want to point out. You said the collapse of the global economy, in particular in the stock market, has been forecast since the 70s. The power of the markets was unleashed in the 60s as the elite began to lose power to the asset strippers and junk bond peddlers, which enabled so many takeovers and subsequent closures of many businesses throughout the West. Okay. The problem with this forecast is that those with vested interest just change the rules as they see fit. I couldn't agree more. They also printed a great deal of money to solve the problems of 2008 and also during the pandemic. This capacity to freely print money may well be coming to an end, and that could spell the death of the main stock exchanges. And I see where you're coming from with this. I agree with what you're saying. They don't even have to print money anymore. People always use that term, printing money. Like you see these printing presses just making $100 bills. They don't have to do that anymore. They can just move a decimal in a computer. Well, now we got $1 trillion versus $100 million or $100 billion or whatever, right? That's easy peasy, right? Japanesey, right? And what you're saying, it's true. Now, in 2008, just like during the pandemic, they bailed out corporations, right? They gave money to, the lion's share of the money went to corporations, and a pittance, just the crumbs, went to the people who actually needed it. And so they did it because they said, if we don't get this money right, the whole system's going to go down, right? And then what did they do? They didn't use that money to stabilize anything. They went and started buying like the banks started buying other banks up for cheap, right? This last go round, they took a lot of that money, that trillions of dollars, and started buying up a lot of real estate, to the point now, I mean, you look at it now in this country when it comes to the real estate market. How can anybody who's, let's say, lower middle class afford to buy a home in this country? I don't know how anybody can even afford to live and rent a place without having a dozen other roommates, right? Because rents in the United States are just through the roof, and it's everywhere. I thought it was just in Atlanta. No, it's everywhere. Everywhere. I can't believe what people are paying for rent for real estate now. It's insane, right? And that all came from a lot of the money that was given to these corporations, and I talk about this story. I saw this kid with a t-shirt, and unfortunately I couldn't say anything to him because I was not in a position to say something to him at that time, but I really wanted to. But he was a young kid, and the shirt said, "Socialism never." That's just fine and dandy, right? But are we not living in a socialist country? This is what you're saying, right? I mean, they're giving, they gave trillions of dollars to these corporations. They give it to the people. We're living in a corporate socialist environment right now. Hands down, you can't deny it, right? And yet, anytime they give any money to the people about anything, oh my gosh, that's going to create hyperinflation. Your hard-earned savings are going to go right down the tubes because the Democrats are printing up all this money. No, both sides have been doing it for a long time. Let's just keep that real right now, and all we would have to do is just cut our military spending in half. But no, can't do that. No, that's bad. So let's keep the military going. But I don't really want the military to have trillions of dollars a year for their budgets. I'd rather them have 250 to 500 billion dollars maybe, right? And keep it maybe just a little bit above our nearest competitor, China, I think, for what they're putting into their military. Right now, we are outspending the bottom or the top 10, military spending governments, right? We're outspending them twice as much, right? Why do we need to do that, right? For what, right? So they can send a balloon over our country. I mean, I'm throwing that in there too, but you know what I'm saying. So, but it's just priorities. But it's all what the powers that be, the propaganda that they keep putting out there. And there's another reason why we're not going to very easily give up spending militaries, because the other part of your comment that you said that I wanted to talk about in terms of the points of darkness, you said Creme answered a question about whether the forces of darkness could ever launch another war like World War II. He said that they had 2 points of evil in the world, Washington, Tel Aviv, and the third one in the old Soviet republics. It was not identified because it was not fully established. The hope was that it could be stopped. I think with the rise of neo-Nazis in Ukraine over the last 9 years is a good indicator which republic it was, and the sordid history of Stephen Bandera tells you what that group were all about. To me, the war in Ukraine is the current battlefront of the Black Lodge. All right, so first and foremost, what Benjamin Creme was talking about, okay, you're partly right about the points of darkness. First, there's 3, actually. It's not just 2. And it comes from... It's a resurfacing of the points of darkness during World War II, kind of like what you're elucidating, hinting at, with the Nazis in Germany being one point, the fascists in Italy being the other, and the militarist in Japan, not the emperor of Japan, but the militarist in Japan during World War II. When they were defeated, they were not destroyed. It was the hope of the masters during June of 1945 that by their defeat, they would seal to the domain of that forces of darkness, which is the Antichrist energy, is what it's also referred to, because the 3 points of darkness allowed that energy to come into the world and do its destructive work, like it did 2,000 years ago during the time of Nero. Will eventually do another, I think, 3,000 years from now, halfway in the middle of the Capricorn Age, is the last time that energy will come out again. But it was hoped that they would be sealed to their domain and not influence humanity at all. And humanity would then eventually start to accept the principle of sharing, want peace, those kind of things. And then Maitreya would have been able to come out as early as 1950. That was the hope of the masters, which of course historically did not happen. What happened was there was a powerful lobbyists in Washington and in some other countries like Britain and France that lobbied our politicians to reinstate the state of Israel and allow those people who suffered under the hands of the Nazis a homeland, where they were offered homelands in different countries, but they didn't want those. They wanted Israel back, right? Now the Palestinians were living in their homeland. And they had been living in there for centuries, and they up and moved them by force, moved them out. It was an unjust situation. It's totally destabilized peace in the Middle East and around the world by them doing this, and they reinstated the state of Israel. Then 3 more points of darkness manifested, and it's not in Tel Aviv and Washington. It was actually in the Zionist political movement in Israel. And not in Washington, but in the Pentagon, which the Pentagon technically is on the other side of the river in Virginia. And then the third was actually not announced, but it was in the former country of Yugoslavia, or the Baltic states. And if you know anything about the history of that with Milosevic and the breaking up of in the Civil War in that area with all the genocide and those kind of things, you can see the manifestation of that energy there. But that was the weakest point of that triangle, according to Benjamin Creme's master. The strongest being in Israel, the second strongest being in the Pentagon, and like I said, the third strongest, but still very strong in the Baltic states, not in Ukraine. And it could be said, like you're saying, about the war in Ukraine being a battle between the Dark Lodge, as you put it, right? Well, I mean, pretty much every war that the United States has started since the inception of the Pentagon could be said to be that, because they're being influenced. The president, who's the one that declares they don't declare the war. I guess the Congress does, but who starts the war and then the Congress eventually declares war against that country, right, is all being influenced by the Pentagon, which Benjamin Creme's master said is actually the group that's actually running the country. It's not the president himself. That's where the problem is. They keep saying it's George Soros, but it's not George Soros, it's the Pentagon. So that's that force of darkness. And according to Ben's master, every single president since the inception of the military-industrial complex being formed in the, 50s, has been influenced by that force of darkness to some degree. But the Republican presidents were influenced more by that energy than the Democrats, but they're still just as guilty of it. And you can kind of see the history of the presidents of what they've done, right? They have all these, even Obama had this wonderful ideals that he had in place. And then once he took office, squashed it, right? So there's a lot of issues at stake that the masters have to contend with. That's one of them. The forces of darkness in the Pentagon, the Zionist movement in the Eastern Bloc, right, or the former Yugoslavia, and those kind of things. But according to the masters, that's easy for them to counteract their efforts that way. It's the complacency of humanity that's causing the biggest issue, and commercialization is a direct result of keeping humanity complacent, because you're greedy, you're wanting the profits, and we're all guilty of it. Every single one of us are guilty of this. Of contributing to the system, whether we want to or not, right? But anyway, I really appreciate you guys' comments. I love you guys. You guys take care, and I look forward to putting up new videos in the future. Remember to take action and help SOP save our planet. Thanks for listening, and we look forward to talking to you again in future videos.